going to be John Inman from CSUMB. The title of his talk is Goat Browsing and Shrub Encroachment in a California Coastal Grassland.
Good morning. I'd like to start just by saying thank you to the organizers, Rachel and Crystal, for organizing and for letting me talk about goats. I'm not sure if they swim, but and Ben over there in the audience for telling me that it was okay, that I could sign up. So first, let's see. Can anyone tell me what's going on here? You need an in. Follow the tip of this hat down. This is what you call woody encroachment. And it's a big problem. Woody just cost his team 5 yards. There's another kind of woody encroachment. It's also called shrub encroachment. It's also a big problem. Simply defined, it's the process through which grasslands convert over time to shrublands or woodlands. And here's a good example where you can see a nice native bunch grass land. These are bunches, California state grass, and here are shrublands slowly encroaching. This is a global phenomenon that's been noticed for at least the past 100 years around the world, and rangelands are the largest land cover type in the world, so it's an extensive problem. And it's a problem for two main reasons. One is that it's a threat to biodiversity, and two is it is a threat, or at least impinges upon both subsistence and industrial food systems. So the cause, it's not easy to understand. It's probably an interplay of a lot of factors, such as livestock grazing, fire regimes or changes in fire regimes, climatic variations like drought, and even increasing concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The leading theory is that it's an interaction primarily between livestock grazing and fire regimes. So livestock grazing, as it's been practiced in the modern era, has removed the fine fuels that fire depends on to get started in wildlands. And many ecosystems, especially rangelands, which happen to be in semi-arid to arid regions, depend on fire. And when you remove the fire, woody species can recruit in to these areas and colonize. And if that fire recurrence interval becomes long enough, those woody species grow to the point that they're invulnerable to fire. So over a large area, there can actually be irreversible changes. And it's kind of funny that it's like the opposite of deforestation, and both are problems for different reasons. So it's not surprising that this is a global phenomenon, that we would have our own instance in our own backyard. Fort Ord land managers have noticed over the past 15 years or so shrub encroachment in grasslands there. This is sort of an aerial photo of Colorcitos Canyon in Fort Ord National Monument, if we're all familiar with Fort Ord, just down there in the seaside. In 1999, these open areas have more or less completely filled in with coyote bush within 15 years. And this is a concern for the reasons that I've stated. Basically, for biodiversity, the Colorcitos grasslands are habitat for purple needlegrass, which is the California state grass, and other conservation priorities that depend on that habitat. And Fort Ord also hosts a large herd of sheep, which for most of the year depend on these grasslands exclusively as their source of food. So the BLM was sort of at a loss as to how to address this, and they were in fact at a loss to even explain it. Part of the story could be that Fort Ord has a long military history. Starting in 1917 and going all the way through 1994, it was used for artillery training. And as you might expect, with artillery training, there was a lot of wildfires that would break out in the dry Mediterranean climate grasslands. So there's your fire right there. On top of that, they would regularly have prescribed burns because regularly prescribed burns would reduce the intensity of the fires that would break out. But in 1994, the base was decommissioned and began to be redeveloped for residential use and CSUMB campus and a host of other uses. And they developed a wildland urban interface. And fire is no longer a welcome part of the management regime with the smoke and the perceived risk of fire, prescribed burns, escaping and damaging homes. And there, I think, was a specific instance of an unfortunate day when the winds carried the smoke to Carmel, and there was a large and influential outcry. So the fires have slowed down, if not stopped, and in the meantime, if we just go back, we're seeing this for the past 15 years. So Bruce Delgado, the botanist at the BLM there, was on the verge of starting a mastication study, basically bringing in tractors and chainsaws to remove the coyote brush mechanically and study how long it took for it to resprout, if it would inevitably resprout. When a large goat company in Orinda, just in the Bay Area, called Goats R Us. I'm gonna make that up. Called and asked them if they could park their goats there for the winter. They're actually used mostly for shrub clearing, for fire hazards around the state, and he was really excited because that's just like so much more exciting than bulldozers. So they worked it out, and now we've started a goat grazing, or browsing study, I should say. So I and BLM established 12 plots and paired with 12 control plots, and once a year we go out there and collect plant cover data along these transects. And results so far, this is a long-term study. We weren't expecting immediate results because there's sort of a vegetative regrowth that happens in the spring. So the goats come in and they attack the carry bush, and then springtime, the rains come, and then springtime, and they just resprout. So we were expecting to take several years for there to be a noticeable difference. But already in the first year, we've noticed basically that the difference in percent cover in the control plots from 2014 to 2015 has continued to increase. Although that result is not significant, it could indicate that this encroachment process, if left to its own devices, would be continuing. Whereas in the grazed plots, there is a significant difference where the percent cover has been reduced from 2014 to 2015. And I should confess right away that these data were actually collected earlier this year, a couple months ago. So this was sort of a preliminary data collection. The official data collection is on now. It was happening last week, and it's going to be happening next week. And that should give us a more realistic view of the actual change, because there has been some vegetative regrowth. But so far, it's pretty encouraging. So earlier I stated that livestock grazing was actually driving shrub encroachment. How does it make sense then that goats can be used to reverse supposedly irreversible shrub encroachment? And one of the important distinctions is that goats are browsers as opposed to grazers, which means they prefer to eat the leaves and shoots of woody species as opposed to cattle and sheep, which spend most of their days with their heads in the grass and eating other low-lying plants. Another very important distinction is the management method that we inherited from Goats R Us. The BLM didn't design the method in which the goats were managed. Goats R Us actually has full-time Peruvian shepherds that stay with the goats 24/7 in the backcountry of Fort Worth for months at a time, living in trailers with their sheepdog. They're incredible at what they can do. It's labor intensive. They're having a big impact on thousands of acres of land, but it's a full-time job for them. Setting up electric fencing and clearing the brush to set up the fencing. Specifically, overnight, the goats are held, 1,400 goats are held in a 1 acre area in dense coyote brush. And they don't have much choice except to eat the coyote brush. So it's reduced basically to sticks. Then during the day, they're let out to graze in the grassy hillsides. But that is responsible as much as they're browsing for the reduction in the coyote brush, which raises the question of scalability. Earlier I said that this was a global concern that was taking place over very large extents. And I don't know if there's the interest or the resources to apply these methods on hundreds of thousands of acres. This is worked on 3,000 acres was the grassland area, and the actual coyote brush dense area was probably less than 200 acres. Okay, then I might as well go forward with some less conclusive things I could talk about. But it's always in the back of my mind, like working with animals. A huge reason that there's interest in this work is because animals are part of our food system, and there has been a tremendous amount of thought and concern about that on many different levels. There's profound ecological arguments against livestock grazing. There's very, very profound arguments on moral and ethical grounds, and there's also health concerns. I mean, the mainstream, not the mainstream, but conventional wisdom is that, animal fats, saturated fats lead to heart disease. So I guess I just feel the need to sort of defend, or at least explain why I'm still interested in animals as a part of food systems. And it comes from some numbers that the UN puts out looking at arable lands worldwide. Arable lands are basically lands that are able to be cultivated for crops. And that number has been steady for several decades. It's about 10% of the Earth's surface. While technology has been able to increase the number of people fed on that area, I think all of our food systems, the oceans, the croplands, and the rangelands, they're all, at least there's reports that they're being degraded, which of course is very alarming. Technology so far has been able to keep up with the effect of yesterday's technologies, but we may be kicking the can down the road a little bit. And when we get to the end of that road, I think we're going to need all available resources to maintain a sustainable food system. And even organic agriculture, which has the stated purpose of being sustainable, if you're not going to use synthetic fertilizers, at the very least, the most important product of livestock probably is the food. And on that note, please.
Are those the same goats that were along Marine Lab? They had an electric fence and a Great Pyrenees, and they were like eating shrubs. Was that your study site too? Or?
You know, I don't think we have Great White Pyrenees. We have these, I guess they're, well, what do you call those little sheepdogs?
The Australian?
Border collies.
Oh.
Yeah, they're shepherds. Because the shepherds live with the goats, predation is a concern. I think they went to the Santa Lucia Preserve and lost a dozen or so goats in a night to a mountain lion attack. So predation is a concern. But because the shepherds are out there, I guess they kind of act in place of the livestock guardian dogs. But this picture, I cropped it. If I uncropped it, you would actually see the Great White Pyrenees sitting here. This is a different area, a different operation, but it was just convenient for me to take this picture. Yes?
I was wondering what the difference is for erosion control between the native grasslands and the woody sagebrush where it's taken over. Do you see a difference in erosion? Or no?
I haven't looked at erosion. I think as long as there's plant cover of any kind, especially bunch grasses with their roots that go down 20 feet, I think that erosion would be similar.
So you don't lose any erosion control when you have coyote brush taking over, like that picture that looked like big stones.
Oh, this picture. Sorry.
Yeah.
I do see some bare dirt, but I certainly don't think you lose erosion control with coyote brush encroachment. I mean, it's the problem really from a biodiversity and livestock standpoint is it's a closed canopy, so there wouldn't even be range between the surface.
Are you concerned about any potential negative impacts of the goats on the environment? Are they getting rid of things that you want to still be there?
Yes, and that's part of what maintains my interest is the complexity. You really, as a land manager, you have to make decisions, and you have to watch things happen and make you cringe. Like, I guess I'm not even supposed to mention this really, but oak trees, I mean, they like woody species, right? So oak trees, this is why California, at least in intensively grazed areas, has a dearth of oaks. There's no oaks recruiting. If you wanted oaks to recruit, you'd have to figure out some method like fencing, or otherwise maybe painting the trunks or something that's some unpalatable substance. Also, when you have livestock concentrated in such high numbers, you can get down to bare earth if you're not careful, which definitely leads to, I would say grazing leads to soil erosion more than
The species.
yeah. Conversion.
So one more question.
So John, I think it's really interesting how we're using some traditional indigenous processes like goat grazing to deal with some modern problems. Can you help connect the dots for me between goat grazing and sustainable food systems?
Sure. So in this particular case, it perhaps is tenuous, but forward grasslands are sustaining a herd of sheep, which are a meat product. And the conversion of these grasslands represent a lowering of the carrying capacity for those sheep. Globally, I think it's just that magnified, but perhaps to even more unmanageable scales. Like in the Midwest, much of the tall grass prairie is converting to forest, which means you can no longer run livestock there. And of course, that's kind of why I brought up this slide you immediately run into a lot of questions like, well, should we even really be producing meat on such a large scale? I mean, there's great arguments why we should be. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Michael Pollan, but I kind of more or less subscribe to his idea of just pay $20 a pound for meat and eat it once a week instead of 95 cents for a dollar menu at Jack in the Box.
All right, let's thank John.